about the Reichchurch was that it was Protestant, and all the Protestant groups gathered together, and they were allowed to continue worship and holding services if they were loyal to the state. So there you've got the cross and the swastika. Yeah, you hear now. It's so the thing about that was that you had they had to take parts of the Bible out because in order to eradicate the Jewish memory, like the Old Testament, right? They had to. There's stories, aren't there, of congregations singing louder as the trains to the concentration camps went by, full of people that were going to meet their end, were going to be gassed in the chambers. The state imposed a bishop who would conform to Nazism, to state socialism, Ludwig Müller. Who can imagine such a thing? It's grotesque. Now, of course, but who could imagine a church that supported apartheid or the slave trade, South Africa, or churches during slave trade times, America, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's just think about just contextualize all of these things. But I'm just giving this as an example. It was the Christians also that the true Christians that also resisted this. It's always true Christians that resist the muddle and the mess. But the third possibility is not just to bind up the wounds of the victims, and I think we've done a lot of that. Yes? And there are so many victims because when you lose truth, there's a lot of victims. And this is from a letter that the correspondence secretary to the Archbishop of Canterbury, Sir Justin Welby, sent in relation to Franklin Graham. Every event closing down on Franklin Graham. All right? So this is the letter, an extract from the letter. The decision that the venues have taken do not necessarily constitute an infringement on freedom of religion and belief. It does. Those responsible for the venue must consider, on the one hand, the freedom of those holding the event to exercise their freedom of speech, religion and belief, and on the other hand, the care and protection of people who might feel threatened and upset by the gospel. It is unlikely that the reason for the cancellation of the events is the gospel or Mr. Graham's faith in Jesus. Rather, it is more likely to be as a result of reported comments and associations made by Mr. Graham and the offence they have caused. The gospel in itself is not hate speech. It is highly unfortunate that at times those who preach it have at other times spoken in ways that prejudice or discriminate against others. This is always regretful and does not help to further the kingdom, capital K. So there you have Franklin Graham speaks the gospel plainly. Franklin Graham speaks about sin, generally. And he talks about the cross, the cost of the cross. Costly grace, not cheap grace. But he is not backed up by the Archbishop of Canterbury. Well, Nigel and Sally Rowe, 6-year-olds, now there are 3 6-year-olds cross-dressing in a small school in the Isle of Wight. And the letter, this came from the diocese. This is the Isle of Wight letter from the diocese. The school is legally bound to respect the wishes of the pupils and parents involved. We're aware that both pupils and the wider may react negatively to ambiguous expressions of gender, but here are examples of transphobic behaviour. An inability to accept a transgender person is actually a real female or male. So this is for 6-year-olds, and the parents of the children who are disturbed by a 6-year-old boy becoming a girl in the class and go into the school, are very involved in the school, are being called transphobic. This comes from the Church of England leadership, the Church of England governors, but they have been in consultation with the diocese. So the diocese in the Isle of Wight, in the Portsmouth Diocese, education body, supports children transitioning. So the outworking of the stuff that happens on the floor of synod The outworking of all of this on the ground is that 6-year-old children in Church of England schools are being, the pastoral push is to affirm them in their transition. The Diocesan Education Board, the bishops that were acting with the Bishop of Chelmsford being obviously the lead on it within the diocese, have all helped the children to transition. When this broke in the press about John Parker asking this, the Bishop of Chelmsford issued a letter to the clergy in his diocese saying this: the story, which has been energetically promoted by a pressure group, that's Christian Concern, centres on a vulnerable child going through an extremely difficult and sensitive period in their life. So the vulnerable child is in their life, yes. No, I'm actually aware that everything said in public on this matter has the potential to cause harm to this child. So Christian Concern, you're energetically promoting this agenda and you could harm the child. In fact, don't you know the suicide rates of transgender children? Yes? John Parker and I, we've always had a warm relationship, and it moves on. I support the actions taken by the Board of Education and the school in question. They have done right by the child. This does not mean that I or they do not understand and respect the concerns raised by John and others, and we will continue to work with schools about their new use of external training providers, because Mermaid had gone in. That reflection has begun. I hope and pray that you, my sisters and brothers in the Chelmsford Diocese, will receive this letter in the spirit of reconciliation with which it is sent. All right? So the spirit of reconciliation is get with the programme. Be quiet. Not do the right thing. Church of England transgender guidance was used against the doctor. We agreed the theological evidence. We had Martin Parsons, but they produced the opposition produced the Church of England's guidance against us. So he lost his job because he wouldn't say that a biological male was a female on official paper. And the Church of England's guidance was used to say not all Christians believe what you do. You see what happens when we depart from truth?